Assalamu alaikum guys. In this video we'll be covering the coordination and control MCQs from question number 23 till question number 33. If you are wondering which past papers I'm referring to, these are our Ink Scribe O Levels Biology past papers. If you want to buy them, you can just send us a DM at inkscribe1 on our Insta account. Once you have our past papers, you have a very easy access to all our explanations to the questions. All you have to do is scan a QR code that will be right beneath the topic, and you will be headed to the playlist on YouTube where each MCQ and each question is explained with great explanations. So, having said all of this, let's begin with our video. Question number 23. The diagram shows the external view of a brain, that means how the brain looks from the outside. Which part of the brain is concerned with thinking and making decisions? So let's start by naming each part. Part A is the cerebellum, and it is the largest part of the brain, and it has these functions: that conscious thought and voluntary action, sensory perception, memory and learning, language processing, emotional responses, problem solving and reasoning, motor planning. So you can see all of the work you do, this is kind of the hub of that. B is your cerebellum, and it has these functions such as motor coordination, that means when all your muscles work together, your balance and posture, your muscle tone and regulation. C is the medulla, and medulla has these functions, which is to control all the cardiac activities, all the respiratory activities, all the blood pressure regulation, the swallowing and vomiting reflexes. And lastly, we have the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is majorly known for temperature regulation, hunger and thirst control, sleep wake cycle regulation, or emotional responses. Now you have to remember all these functions because this is majorly asked question in P1. So you should exactly know which part of the brain is concerned with what departments. So right now in this statement, the part of the brain that is concerned with thinking and making decision is A, because you can see the conscious thought process is done in this, and that's how you make decisions. Question number 24. In diabetes, glucose appears in the urine. How does insulin prevent this? To understand this question, you should first know the relation between diabetes and insulin. So, diabetes can be divided into two types. One is diabetes 1 and the other is diabetes 2. So, when a patient suffers from diabetes 1, it is that their body cannot produce insulin at all, and they have to take insulin injections every day. What is insulin? Insulin is the hormone that is released into the bloodstream to lower down your blood glucose level. And the second type of diabetes is when the patient's body cannot produce sufficient insulin, or the insulin that it is producing is not being responded by the cells. So that is called insulin resistance. क्योंकि इंसुलिन रेजिस्टेंस तब होती है when the cells cannot uptake glucose and store inside them, और इससे क्या होता है कि blood glucose level आपका high ही रहता है. So keeping this fact in mind and insulin's main function, let's check the options. Increasing the amount of water in the urine. This does not make sense because insulin's main function is not to deal with the amount of water and it does not directly affect it. So A cannot be the option. B, increasing the uptake of glucose into body cells. This is absolutely right because insulin promotes the uptake of glucose by body cells, in particular muscle and adipose or fat cells. And this is done by facilitating the entry of glucose into the cells, and that helps lower down the concentration of glucose in the bloodstream and also prevents its excretion in the urine. That is what the question asked you. So this is the correct option, but let's look at option C and D. Preventing starch being digested into glucose. This is wrong. It does not prevent the digestion of starch into glucose. It only affects the already made glucose that is in your bloodstream. So, for example, आपने सुबह नाश्ता किया है, so after that your body will only act on that glucose जो आपने उस carb meal से खाई होगी. It cannot prevent the digestion of starch into glucose. That is not insulin's function. Similarly, option D says to raise blood pressure. Again, insulin's main function is not to raise blood pressure, that is has to be deal with the kidney section. So B has to be the right option. Question number 25. Which structures are all involved in controlling human body temperature? Option A, blood vessels near the skin surface. Yes, this is true. The blood vessels near the skin surface will either constrict or dilate according to the temperature. The cerebellum, this is not true because it is not directly involved in controlling and regulating the human body temperature. It is the hypothalamus that is involved directly. The cerebellum has the following functions: motor coordination, balance and posture, muscle tone and regulation. And sweat glands will obviously produce more sweat or be deactivated in cold conditions. In option B, it says blood vessels near the skin surface. This is involved. The hypothalamus is also involved, and the skeletal muscles generate shivering, which produces heat. So they are also involved in human body temperature. So for now, B is our answer, but let's have a look at other options as well. C, kidneys, and D also has kidneys. So we know that kidneys are not involved directly in controlling the human body temperature. Question number 26. What happens to the ciliary muscle and what happens to the lens when the eye focuses on a distant object? So, when the eye is focusing at a distant object, the suspensory ligaments become tight or taut and they pull the lens and it becomes thin or flatter. So, here you've been given the option thin and thick. You will choose B or D as the right option because they suggest the lens gets thinner. Now, the ciliary muscle relaxes while the suspensory ligaments contract and become tight. So, D have to be the right option. Question number 27. Which statement about brain structure and function is not correct? The cerebellum controls balance. This is true. The cerebellum controls balance, posture, muscle tone and regulation, motor coordination. So here's a simple thing. If you just memorize all these points that I've written here, you're good to go because in every MCQs or questions, you will find these are repeatedly used and asked. And these are their main functions that I've written. So the cerebrum stores memories. This is also true. It helps in memory and learning. The hypothalamus controls movement. This is not specified anywhere. The hypothalamus is involved in temperature regulation, hunger and thirst control, sleep wake cycle regulation, emotional responses, but nowhere movement is seen in the functions of this. So this is wrong, and this is our answer because they've asked to identify which function is not correct about which brain structure. The medulla controls heart rate. Yes, the medulla controls heart rate and all the cardiac activities as well. Question number 28. What is not an example of a simple reflex action? Now you have to understand that a reflex is an involuntary and sudden response to stimuli. So no conscious part of your brain is involved in it. It is an automatic and involuntary response. And this is the diagram of a simple reflex action. Firstly, the stimulus is picked up by the receptor and impulse is transmitted to CNS. CNS is your brain and spinal cord. And then it runs through the sensory and motor neurons. Relay neuron basically connects the sensory and motor neurons pathway so the impulses can be transmitted. The motor neuron would move the impulses from the CNS to the effector organ, and here a protective response would be generated against the stimuli. So let's see what is not an example. Remember, it's written not. Blinking when sand blows in your eyes. Of course, this is a reflex action because you wouldn't involve your conscious part that whether you have to close your eyes or no. इवन अगर आपके पास कोई इंसेक्ट आता है फौरन अपनी आंखें बंद कर लेते बिकॉज इट इज अ प्रोटेक्टिव मेजर फॉर योर आई सो नथिंग गेट्स इनसाइड सो इट इज ऑटोमेटिक. Jumping when hearing a loud noise. Again, this is an involuntary and automatic response. जैसे ही आप कोई sharp noise सुनेंगे, you would automatically jump. You won't think whether I have to jump or no. Removing your hand from a hot object, this is a very common example of a simple reflex action. That as soon as you touch a hot object, you immediately pull away your finger. This is an involuntary, meaning no conscious thought process is involved and it is an automatic response. D is our answer because steering a car to avoid hitting something is involving your conscious part of the brain, your decision making, your motor coordination, everything is involved in it. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि आपको ऑटोमेटिकली आप अपनी गाड़ी को बदल देंगे. You have to see where the car is coming from and according to that you would produce a response. So D is the example of a not simple reflex action. Question number 29. The diagram show the eye viewed from the front and its lens in cross section. Which diagram show the appearance of the pupil and the shape of the lens when looking up at the sky at night? So you have to pick this statement out and know that they are asking you about accommodation reflex as well as pupil reflex. So in pupil reflex, you know that if it is nighttime or dim light, the pupil dilates. So this is the nighttime and this would be the daytime where the pupil constricts in bright light. तो इन दोनों images में से जो pupil dilate कर रहा है that is this picture at number 2. And the pupil constricting is at 1, but since we are specifically talking about night, it has to be 2. So option A and B cannot be the answers because together we have to find the pair that suits the situation the best. Now, looking at the sky means looking at a distant object, and we know when we look at the distant object, our lens becomes flatter or thin. So 4. So 2 and 4 ka jo pair hai, that is option D, hence that is the right one. Question number 30. What is a major function of the medulla in the brain? Again, we go up and recall the function. So it was C. So medulla basically controls cardiac regulation, respiratory control, blood pressure regulation, and swallowing and vomiting reflexes. Coming back to the options, we see that there is controlling contractions of the diagram, which indicates that medulla is involved in respiratory functions as well. So B has to be the option. Balance and coordination is done by the cerebellum. Reasoning and thinking is done by the cerebrum, and D secretion of hormones is done by hypothalamus and sometimes pituitary gland. Question number 31. Which statement about insulin is correct? A. It converts glycogen to glucose. This is wrong. If we convert glycogen to glucose, तो फिर तो blood level increase हो जाएगा. And insulin, we talked about it in the earlier question that insulin is a hormone that is released by the pancreas to lower down the blood glucose concentration. It is broken down by the liver. Yes, this is true because all hormones are broken down in the liver. This is a fact and you should remember it. It is secreted by the liver, it is secreted by the pancreas. So this statement is also wrong. Its release increases blood glucose level. This is the opposite of what insulin does. Insulin lowers down the blood glucose level. So B is the right option. Question number 32. By which mechanism would the body be able to lose most heat on a hot, dry day if the surrounding air temperature is higher than body temperature? That means if it is hot outside, how will the body lose most of its heat to prevent overheating in the body? Do blood vessels in the skin become narrower? This is absolutely wrong because if they become narrow or constrict, they would retain heat inside. And already, if the temperature is hot and the body wants to lose heat, we cannot retain the heat inside. The hair erector muscles relax so hair lie flat. This is one of the mechanisms that would be initiated, but it would not help in losing most of the heat. So we have to just select that option, that mechanism which promotes more heat loss. Option C, shivering by body muscles ceases. Ceases means to stop. So if the shivering by body stops, yes, it would also lose some of the heat, not most of the heat. So correct option is D because when the sweat glands become more active, there is more production of sweat on the surface of the skin. And if the air outside is already hot and dry, then there is more evaporation from the skin surface, and that will leave a cooling effect behind, and that's how most of the heat from the body will be lost. Question number 33, which is our last question for today. What are the short term effects of adrenaline on the body? Adrenaline, again, is a hormone that is released by the adrenal glands in response to stress or a danger situation. It prepares the body for a fight or flight response, and its effects are an increase in heart rate because it has to pump more blood to the muscles. And there is also an increase in blood sugar concentration to provide more energy for quick use. So, 3 and 4 are the right options because they are two of the short term effects of adrenaline on the body. Once the adrenaline has left its effects and there is no more need of adrenaline in the body, it is destroyed in the liver. So, decreased blood sugar concentration and decreased heart rate are not the effects of adrenaline on the body. So, that's it for today's video. Hope you understood all the concepts and techniques on how to solve the coordination and control MCQs. See you in the next video.